They found the campsite at dawn, canvas shredded, equipment scattered like a giant hand had swept through it. The screaming had stopped hours ago, but that terrible silence felt worse than any sound. In the center of the devastation, where the excavation pit had been, only gouged earth remained. Not random destruction, deliberate spirals carved into the soil as if something massive had unwound itself from below. The idol was gone, and that's when the vanishing began. My name is Arun Chaudhry. I was sent by the Geological Survey of India to investigate seismic anomalies beneath a rural tea village in Upper Assam. Unusual frequency patterns that didn't match any known geological activity. Our instruments detected focused tremors originating from precise coordinates, something our Guwahati office had never seen before. What I found buried beneath that soil wasn't geological. The village of Borlung clung to the mountainside like a child to its mother's sari, perpetually shrouded in mist that rolled down from the peaks. The locals called it Itar Care, the sleeping one, and whenever they spoke the name, their voices dropped to whispers. Children were hushed mid-sentence if they mentioned the old songs about things that walked backward beneath the roots. I arrived in March of 1996 with a team of 4. Parimal Singh, our lead excavator, and a veteran of 12 years with GSI. Dr. Meera Banerjee, our archaeologist on loan from the Archaeological Survey. Ravi Dutta, our documentation specialist. And Bimal Gogoi, our local guide who spoke both Assamese and the hill dialects. The seismic readings were unlike anything in our database. Rhythmic pulses every 72 hours, like a massive heartbeat beneath the earth. Standard protocol demanded immediate investigation and hourly reports to headquarters. When our first test dig revealed carved stone humming with an energy that made our magnetometers spin wildly, I radioed Guwahati immediately. Possible archaeological find, I reported, requesting additional expertise and extended survey clearance. The response crackled back through static. Document everything. Maintain regular contact. Do not proceed without proper archaeological oversight. But the villagers had already gathered at our camp's perimeter. Old women clutched prayer beads. Men smoked in tight circles, their eyes never leaving the excavation site. "Bora thakidia?" they begged in broken Hindi, gesturing frantically in Assamese. "Bury it again. Itar Kher Jongli ke wapas bulayega." It will call the forest back to collect its due. Bimal translated reluctantly, his hands shaking. They say their grandparents made promises, old promises, if we disturb this place. Dr. Banerjee dismissed it as local superstition interfering with legitimate research. We were scientists. We followed protocols. We were catastrophically wrong. That night, Parimal didn't return to his tent. We'd heard him moving around the dig site after midnight, the scrape of his boots on gravel, the soft metallic clink of tools being set down, then rearranged, then set down again in different patterns. By morning, only his voice echoing from our radio. "Base camp, this is Parimal. I'm not sure where I am. Everything looks backward here. The trees are growing down. Can you hear me? Everything is backward." We searched everywhere. The tea gardens, the stream cutting through the valley, the bamboo groves bordering our camp. We found his boots near the excavation pit. Leather work boots, size 9, positioned heel to heel but pointing in opposite directions, as if he'd been walking forward and backward simultaneously. Deep gouges scarred the leather, not tears, carved lines that formed the same spiraling patterns we'd seen in the stone. I radioed headquarters immediately. Team member missing, requesting immediate backup and extraction protocols. Static, then, unable to confirm your location, Chaudhry. You're not showing on our grid. Maintain position and continue regular reports. Bimal refused to translate what the villagers were singing as they gathered around the boots. But I caught fragments, words about things that walk backward beneath the roots, about the hungry earth that remembers its children. Dr. Banerjee photographed everything with clinical precision. The boots, the spiral gouges, the way the soil around the pit had been disturbed in perfect spirals that mirrored the patterns on the stone. Her hands trembled slightly, the first crack in her scientific composure. That night, Parimal's voice crackled through our radio again, muffled, distant, pleading for help until dawn. We traced the signal with our equipment. It was coming from directly beneath our feet. 3 days in, the idol began to weep. Not water, thick amber resin that seeped from every carved groove, filling our excavation trays with substance that smelled of ancient forests, moss and decay, and something sweeter, like fruit rotting in perfect darkness. And there were new markings, symbols that hadn't existed before, etching themselves into the stone as we watched. Dr. Banerjee documented each change obsessively, photographing the surface every hour, mapping the progression of script that seemed to grow like infected wounds across the idol's face. The patterns caused immediate physical pain, sharp, stabbing headaches when you looked directly at them, geometric spirals that made your vision blur and your stomach lurch, angular script that seemed to writhe when viewed through peripheral vision, as if the symbols were trying to crawl off the stone and into your eyes. Ravi developed nosebleeds after photographing them. Dr. Banerjee started muttering in her sleep, not Assamese or Bengali, but something older, harsher, full of clicking sounds that human throats shouldn't make. I sent photographs and detailed reports to headquarters via emergency channels. Also contacted Professor Lakshmi Devi at Guwahati University, a folklorist specializing in pre-Aryan tribal mythology. Her initial response came 2 days later. These symbols, they match warning markers I've seen in restricted archives. Consulting with tribal elders who might remember the old stories. A week later, a second telegram arrived, more urgent. Stop all excavation immediately. Confirmed with last surviving keeper, not a deity, prison seal, something trying to escape. Evacuate now. But by then, the village had already begun its slow exodus. Families packing in the dead of night, disappearing into mountain paths without explanation. Those who remained moved differently slower, as if walking through thick water. Their eyes held a terrible distance that made conversation impossible. Bimal started bringing offerings without being asked. Flowers, rice, small brass lamps. For Itar Kir, he explained, his voice hollow. So it sleeps again. So it doesn't remember how to be hungry. My radio calls to headquarters grew more desperate. Static answered more often than human voices. The trees began bending inward, ancient sal and teak groaning as they leaned at impossible angles, their massive trunks creaking like ship masts in a storm. Roots erupted through the earth in slow, questing spirals, reaching toward the idol with deliberate hunger. On the 7th day, Dr. Banerjee was found standing upright in the forest canopy, 30 feet above ground, not climbing, not fallen, standing perfectly vertical between the branches of a massive tree, as if she'd simply walked up through the air. Her feet balanced on nothing, her body held in place by an arrangement of twisted branches that curved around her like protective arms. When we called to her, she smiled. The expression was wrong on her face, too wide, stretching her mouth beyond human anatomy. Her teeth had grown longer, sharper, and when she opened her mouth to respond, sound emerged like wind through dead leaves, like the whisper of roots pushing through soil, like something vast and patient breathing in the darkness below. She's not gone, Bimal whispered, backing away from the tree. The forest gave her back. Wrong. We tried reaching her with climbing equipment and extended poles. Every time we approached, she moved, not climbing, but flowing through the branches like water, finding its level, always staying just beyond reach, always watching with that terrible, impossible smile. That morning, Ravi discovered symbols carved into his forearms, the same spiraling patterns from the idol, etched deep into his skin as if drawn by a careful, patient hand. He had no memory of making them, no recollection of pain. The cuts didn't bleed, but they itched constantly, and when he scratched them, they seemed to grow deeper, spreading up toward his shoulders. I don't understand, he whispered, staring at the patterns with growing horror. I keep having these thoughts, words I don't know, but they feel. He touched the symbols and his expression shifted, becoming distant, almost peaceful. They're teaching me new words, old words, words that taste like earth. At night, we dreamed of walking through endless forests where the trees had human faces and the ground breathed beneath our feet. We dreamed of being buried alive and finding comfort in it, of roots growing through our bodies and feeding something vast and patient in the perfect darkness below. It wasn't a god we'd awakened. It was a gate. The truth came from Putli Devi, the last villager to flee, an old woman who had lived in Borlung for 90 years. She found me alone at the radio, still trying desperately to reach headquarters, and spoke in urgent whispers. "My great-grandmother was the last keeper," she said, glancing constantly at the excavation site. "Before the British, before the tea gardens, before the roads carved up our hills. This place was aware. The forest was hungry, and it would take people, hunters, travelers, anyone who ventured too deep into its roots. But slowly, carefully, one at a time, so as not to disturb the greater balance. The idol wasn't worshipped," she explained. "It was maintained. A seal carved by desperate hands to contain something that had been feeding on the village for generations beyond memory. The symbols weren't decorative. They were a binding, a promise, a lock that had held for 8 centuries. The old ones made a bargain," Putli continued, her voice barely audible. "Sleep and be fed in dreams. Whisper and be heard in prayers. Take one life per generation, always the one who wandered too far, who listened too closely to the forest songs, and be satisfied. But never wake, never walk, never hunt as it did in the ancient times when the world was younger and darker." Every family in the village had contributed to maintaining the seal. Weekly offerings, seasonal rituals, careful attention to the songs and stories that kept the binding strong. The moment our excavation cracked that ancient promise, something vast and patient crawled out of the hollow spaces beneath Assam. Not a creature, a hunger, ancient and intimate, familiar with human fear in ways that predated language. It had been dreaming for so long that it had forgotten the difference between sleep and death, between appetite and existence. "The offerings weren't worship," Putli whispered. "They were payment, a small price to keep something terrible satisfied with dreams instead of flesh. And now," she gestured at the bent trees, the empty village, the idol weeping resin in its broken pit. "Now it remembers how to be awake. I abandoned the site in 1996, left everything, equipment, documentation, my teammates still trapped in their various transformations, drove straight to Guwahati without stopping, caught the first train to Delhi, and filed a report that blamed equipment failure and recommended permanent site abandonment. The Geological Survey of India buried my report in bureaucratic obscurity. Inconclusive findings due to technical difficulties and adverse local conditions. The site was classified as geologically unstable and closed to further investigation. I haven't spoken of this since. Not to colleagues, not to family, not even to the therapist I saw for 3 years of nightmares that left me afraid to sleep in rooms with wooden floors. Dr. Banerjee was found at the base of her tree a week after I left, according to the local police. Natural causes, they said. Heart failure. But the report noted unusual root growth around the body, as if the earth itself had tried to pull her down. Ravi disappeared entirely. His parents received a letter saying he joined an ashram in Rishikesh, but the handwriting spiraled in patterns that hurt to look at. Bimal's family said he walked into the forest one morning, following a path that hadn't existed the day before. I moved to Bangalore, changed fields entirely, became a structural engineer for urban construction projects. Safe, predictable work with concrete and steel, instead of mysteries sleeping in ancient earth. I convinced myself it had been some kind of breakdown, collective hysteria brought on by isolation and local superstition. But 3 nights ago, something changed. I was reviewing foundation plans when my apartment building security called. "Sir, there's a delivery for you, very heavy." The courier left without getting a signature, just said you'd been expecting it. No return address, no delivery company logo, just a wooden crate sitting in my lobby, bound with rope that smelled of resin and old forests. Inside, wrapped in cloth that felt warm to the touch, was the idol. It's sitting on my kitchen table now. The symbols are still changing, spiraling across its surface in patterns that make my eyes water and my teeth ache. The resin has started again. Thick amber tears that smell of moss and decay and something sweeter, like fruit perfectly preserved in darkness. Sometimes I catch movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that linger too long, shapes that don't match the objects casting them. The wooden floors of my apartment creak at night, even when I'm sitting perfectly still. And the idol is smiling now. A new expression carved into stone that was blank when I first found it. An expression that's too wide, too knowing, too familiar. Last night, I heard something scratching beneath my floorboards. A soft, patient sound, like roots growing through concrete, like something massive, slowly unwinding itself from sleep. I've been having the dreams again. Endless forests where the trees have human faces and the ground breathes beneath my feet. But now the dreams feel different, not like visions, like memories, like coming home. The idol is teaching me new words in a language I shouldn't know. Words that taste like earth and feel like promises. Words that make me understand why the villagers whispered, why they made their offerings, why they were so afraid. Because it's not just hungry anymore, it's grateful. And I think it's time to go back to Assam, to finish what we started, to honor the bargain my team accidentally broke. The forest is calling me home,